Hello everyone, and welcome back to Sun Moon Audiobook, the channel where we share wisdom and inspiring book journeys to help you grow and develop your best self, inside and out. There's a silence before dawn that feels almost holy, like the world itself is holding its breath, waiting for someone brave enough to step forward and break it with a single note of song. That silence is what creativity often feels like, heavy, still, and aching for life. And most of us carry our own music quietly, hidden in journals, in sketchbooks, in late-night ideas scribbled on scraps of paper, afraid to let it escape into the air. Kleon's voice arrives in that silence, not as a shout, but as a gentle nudge, urging you to open your mouth, to let your music breathe, to show your work. Kleon isn't a distant theorist. He's an artist, a writer, someone who has wrestled with the messy dance of making things and daring to share them. His books feel like conversations with a friend across a coffee table, the kind who believes in you even when you don't. He understands what it's like to be haunted by the urge to create, but paralyzed by the fear of exposure. And his words come from that tender space where vulnerability and courage collide. He tells us that showing your work isn't about self-promotion. It's about connection, about letting the threads of your process weave into someone else's journey. At the heart of his message is this: you don't have to wait until you're finished, polished, or perfect to share. The world doesn't just need your masterpieces. It needs to see the path you walked, the experiments you tried, the mistakes that taught you something. The work is not only the destination, the work is the story of how you got there. And when you share that story, you invite others to find courage for their own. It's like leaving a trail of lanterns in the dark, one by one, showing that the way forward can be lit even by imperfect flames. The first idea that stirs in his book is the simple yet revolutionary act of becoming a documentarian of your own process. To see yourself not just as someone who makes, but as someone who records the making. Imagine a painter who doesn't only hang finished canvases in a gallery, but also shares the smudged palette, the sketches that didn't work, the way light shifted on the wall and inspired a change in color. When you let people see the journey, you don't just deliver a product, you invite them into a world. And there's something disarmingly human in that. We don't fall in love only with polished statues. We fall in love with the fingerprints still pressed in the clay. Think of great creators who have done this. Think of Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks, filled with restless sketches, scattered ideas, and questions that never quite resolved. Those pages remind us that genius is not a single stroke of brilliance, but a restless, ongoing process. And in our age, where connection is built on openness, your own notebooks, your own behind-the-scenes glimpses, can become a source of resonance for someone else. The mantra that repeats through Kleon's vision is this: share what you love, and you'll attract those who love it too. But this doesn't mean broadcasting everything in an endless stream. It's about curating, about noticing what feels alive in your process and offering it like seeds. The work you show becomes a kind of garden where others can wander, find inspiration, and sometimes even leave their own traces. And in this garden, humility becomes your ally. Because showing your work is not about saying, "Look how great I am," but about whispering, "Here's what I'm learning. Here's what I'm wrestling with. Here's what I've discovered along the way." That honesty, that openness becomes the bridge. And yet there's fear. The fear of being overlooked, the fear of being criticized, the fear of being judged for what isn't finished. That fear is real. It pulses in the chest like a second heartbeat. But Kleon gently reminds us that criticism is a sign you're visible, that silence is the only true obscurity. To be seen at all means risking misunderstanding. And still, what a privilege it is to be seen. What a privilege to place your fragile creation into the wide river of human expression, knowing it may float, it may sink, but at least it is no longer caged inside you. The book encourages us to think of sharing not as a spotlight, but as a window. You are not forcing people to look. You're simply opening the shutters, letting the light spill out, and allowing anyone passing by to pause and take a glimpse. Those who are meant to find it will. And that simple act of opening the window can be enough to change the course of someone else's day, maybe even their life. There's another thread Kleon weaves: the power of generosity. Sharing isn't hoarding attention, it's giving away sparks. The more sparks you scatter, the more likely one of them will ignite something in another soul. And often, it's the generosity that echoes the loudest, not the perfection. Think of how many musicians, writers, or creators you admire not only for their finished works, but for their willingness to let you in on their process, to share their failures, their insights, their resources. The internet today is built not just on consumption, but on contribution, and every small piece you share adds to that living mosaic. There is a quiet magic in consistency, in the act of showing up day after day with something small to offer. Kleon reminds us that building a body of work doesn't happen in sudden explosions of brilliance, but in the steady drip of daily sharing, of putting one stone on top of another, until, almost without realizing it, you've built a wall, a garden, a cathedral. Think of it like keeping a diary, not just for yourself, but for the world. Each entry might seem insignificant on its own, a thought, an image, a tiny breakthrough, but together they weave a tapestry that shows the shape of your journey. Over time, those who follow you don't just see your finished projects, they witness your evolution. And there's something profoundly inspiring in being allowed to watch someone grow. The fear that often stops us is the illusion that we need to be original. Kleon dismantles this with the liberating truth: what you share doesn't have to be unique, it has to be honest. Nothing under the sun is entirely original, but your perspective, your particular way of noticing, is something no one else can duplicate. You may think the world doesn't need another photographer, another writer, another coder, another voice, but the world doesn't have your way of seeing. That's the difference. That's the gift. Think of Van Gogh, whose paintings are now synonymous with originality, but who spent years copying other artists, learning their brushstrokes, absorbing their styles. His genius wasn't in creating something out of nothing, but in filtering influences through his own haunted, beautiful vision. That's what sharing your work really is, letting the world glimpse life through your lens. And yet, there's a deeper invitation here: to embrace obscurity, to see it not as a curse, but as a blessing. When you're unknown, you're free. You can experiment wildly, make mistakes without the weight of an audience's gaze, play with ideas that may never take root. Kleon calls this the freedom of obscurity, a time to plant without the pressure of harvest. Many of the artists and innovators we now revere had long years of anonymity, where they honed their craft in secret. Emily Dickinson wrote almost 2,000 poems, yet published only a handful in her lifetime. Her obscurity wasn't wasted, it was fertile soil. For those of us still in the shadows, there's comfort here. You don't have to burst into the world fully formed. You can grow quietly, tenderly, until you're ready. And in the meantime, you can share small glimpses, like seeds carried on the wind, never knowing where they might land. You, who are listening right now, may feel the tug of comparison, the ache of measuring your beginnings against someone else's middle. But what Kleon whispers is that your job is not to outshine anyone. Your job is to shine in your own way, at your own pace, however faint the light may feel. Because even a faint light in a dark room can change everything. There is a mantra here worth holding close. You don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start to become great. Each small act of sharing is a step into becoming. And the beauty is, you never know who needs that step. Someone out there is waiting for exactly what you're afraid to release. One of the most tender truths in this book is the idea that you don't have to create in isolation. We often imagine the artist as a solitary figure locked away in a room, wrestling with inspiration. But Kleon reminds us that creativity is a conversation, a long thread connecting voices across time. When you share your work, you're adding your voice to that chorus. You're not standing alone in the void. You're joining hands with those who came before, and those who will come after. Think of the way musicians sample old records, layering the past into new songs, or how writers quote, reference, and respond to one another across centuries. This isn't theft. It's participation in the great dance of creation. And when you show your work, you're saying, I'm here too. I'm part of this. That's not just art, that's belonging. There's a quiet personal moment that this book stirred in me. I remember sitting once in a dimly lit room with a blank page in front of me, the weight of silence pressing hard. I was afraid to begin, afraid that what I had to say was too small, too unworthy. And then I thought of all the times a small, imperfect thing from someone else, a blog post, a sketch, a few raw lines of poetry had reached me at exactly the right time. I realized that holding back was not humility, it was withholding. That maybe someone out there needed what I was keeping hidden. So I wrote, and I shared, trembling. And though the world didn't roar back in applause, a single message came from someone who said, "This helped me." That was enough. More than enough. Kleon also urges us to think of sharing not just as exposure, but as teaching. Every time you explain how you solved a problem, every time you reveal the thinking behind your choices, you're giving someone else a tool they can use. And teaching doesn't diminish you. It multiplies you. The more you give away, the more you grow. Think of open source programmers who freely share their code, allowing others to build, remix, and improve. Their generosity doesn't erase their contribution, it amplifies it. In your own way, you can do this too by offering not just what you made, but how you made it. That transparency becomes a bridge for others to walk across. And here's where the balance comes in. Showing your work doesn't mean you must bare your soul entirely. You're allowed to keep parts of yourself private, to curate what you share. Kleon uses the phrase, share your scenius, meaning the scene, the ecosystem of inspiration and collaboration you're part of. You don't have to be the star. You can be the connector, the one who shines a light on others, who passes along books, songs, quotes, tools that matter to you. In doing so, you create a kind of constellation around your work, one that others can navigate by. And sometimes, it's in giving others a stage that your own voice is heard most clearly. There comes a point when the heart of Kleon's message softens into something that feels almost parental, like a hand on your shoulder reminding you not to chase applause, but to chase connection. He tells us that sharing your work is not about shouting into the void for attention, but about whispering in ways that resonate with the right ears. Fame, recognition, virality. Those are fleeting, unpredictable wins. What endures is trust. Trust built slowly, moment by moment, as people see your honesty, your consistency, your willingness to contribute. It's not about building a crowd. It's about building a community. And a community is born not through perfection, but through presence. Think of how Mr. Rogers touched generations not by dazzling performances, but by showing up day after day, speaking with gentleness and truth. His work was not a performance to be admired. It was an offering to be received. That's the spirit Kleon is inviting us into. Another crucial invitation in his book is to embrace the role of an amateur. Not amateur in the sense of being lesser, but amateur in the sense of being motivated by love. The word itself comes from the Latin amator, meaning lover. To be an amateur is to be driven not by mastery or recognition, but by joy. And there's something radiant about that. When you share as an amateur, you give people permission to be imperfect too. You remind them that art, creativity, and innovation are not reserved for the elite or the experts. They belong to anyone who dares to play. Consider the way YouTube has transformed music. So many artists began with shaky covers filmed in bedrooms, and yet those raw, imperfect beginnings became the seeds of careers, precisely because they carried the purity of passion. Being an amateur frees you from the prison of expertise, and in that freedom, your work becomes contagious. Kleon also brings forth the idea of storytelling as the lifeblood of showing your work. Facts and finished products alone rarely stir the soul, but stories do. Stories are the vessels that carry meaning across time. When you tell the story of your process, the doubt, the setbacks, the breakthrough moments, you invite others not just to witness your work, but to feel it. Every great brand, every beloved creator, every enduring figure has mastered this. They don't just share what they make, they share why it matters. Steve Jobs could have simply shown the iPhone as a gadget, but he told the story of 1,000 songs in your pocket, or a device that would put the world in your hands. That story shaped how we received it, and it's what we remember. Your own work, no matter how humble, becomes more than itself when you wrap it in the thread of narrative. But storytelling isn't about spinning tales of grandeur. It's about honesty. The small human details often carry more weight than the grand proclamations. Sharing that you spilled coffee on your sketchbook, or that a child's laugh inspired a line of code, can make your work relatable in ways perfection never could. People don't want gods. They want companions. And when you tell your story, cracks and all, you become that companion for someone else. The mantra surfaces again here. Share what you love, and you'll attract those who love it too. There is also a sobering but empowering reminder. You can't control how your work is received. Once you release it, it belongs partly to others. Some will dismiss it, some will misinterpret it, some will ignore it entirely. But that doesn't diminish its worth. Think of Vincent van Gogh, who sold only a single painting in his lifetime, yet now his work hangs in museums and moves millions. He never saw the recognition, but his act of creating and sharing left ripples that outlived him. Kleon urges us to let go of the need for immediate validation, to remember that the timeline of impact is often longer than we expect. The work you share today might not blossom for years, but it can still matter. And along with that letting go comes the wisdom of knowing when to stop. Not every detail of your life needs to be exposed. Not every thought needs to be published. Part of showing your work is learning restraint. Learning how to end a story gracefully. How to leave space for mystery. Think of your favorite books or films. They don't tell you everything. They leave room for your imagination. In the same way, your work doesn't need to reveal every corner of your life. Share enough to invite others in, but keep enough to sustain your own soul. The book also reminds us of the power of persistence. There will be days when sharing feels futile, when your posts fall silent into the abyss, when you wonder if anyone is listening. Those days are part of the process. Every great creator has walked through that valley. The difference between those who leave a mark and those who fade often comes down not to talent, but to persistence, the willingness to keep putting stones on the path. Even when it seems no one is walking it with you. The quiet accumulation of effort builds into something larger than you imagined. And when opportunities come, and they will, the key is to be ready. By showing your work consistently, you prepare the soil. You may not know when the rain will fall, but when it does, your seeds are already planted. Think of Justin Bieber, who was discovered through small, grainy YouTube videos his mother uploaded. Or Lin-Manuel Miranda, who shared snippets of Hamilton long before it hit Broadway, slowly gathering interest until the world was ready. Their breakthroughs weren't sudden. They were the flowering of seeds planted through consistent sharing. There is a pause Kleon builds into his message, one that feels almost like a sigh. Also the acknowledgement of how hard this can be. The loneliness of creating, the vulnerability of sharing, the slow pace of growth. It's not easy, and it's okay to feel that ache, to wonder if it's worth it. This is the midpoint, the moment when doubt feels heaviest, but it's also the moment of deepest possibility. Because if you can hold on through the silence, if you can keep showing up in the face of invisibility, something shifts inside you. You stop creating only for applause and start creating because it is who you are. That's the transformation. That's the freedom. When you begin to see sharing as a gift rather than a gamble, something within you softens. It no longer feels like you're shouting into an indifferent void, but like you're placing small offerings along the path. Offerings that might nourish someone who comes after you. And here is where generosity deepens into something almost spiritual. Kleon reminds us that the more open-handed you are with your process, your lessons, and your discoveries, the richer your creative life becomes. There's an irony in it. The more you give away, the more you end up keeping, because what returns to you is a network of connection, resonance, and shared humanity. This is the quiet economy of creativity, where the currency is not money or fame, but meaning. The danger, of course, is falling into the trap of chasing numbers, metrics, and validation. It is so easy in this age of likes, shares, and comments to measure your worth by the digital applause of strangers. But Kleon urges you to resist that temptation. Metrics are not the measure of meaning. A post that reaches 10 people and deeply moves one of them is more powerful than a post that reaches 10,000 and is instantly forgotten. The value of your work cannot be quantified by algorithms. It is measured in the unseen ways it ripples through lives. And often those ripples reach farther than you will ever know. Maybe your sketch sparks someone else's idea. Maybe your unfinished song gives someone courage to write their own. Maybe your story makes one person feel less alone on a night when loneliness pressed too hard. These are the moments that matter, even if you never hear about them. To keep yourself anchored, Kleon suggests surrounding yourself with a circle of people who truly matter, not the faceless masses, but the few whose voices you trust. He describes it as building your own scenius, a collective of like-minded souls who support and inspire one another. History is full of these scenes. The group of painters in Paris who became the Impressionists, the writers of the Bloomsbury Group, the musicians of Motown. Each individual shone, but it was their togetherness, their cross-pollination, that created movements. In your own way, you can seek or build a scenius too, a group of people who make you better, not by demanding your perfection, but by encouraging your persistence. And persistence often requires protecting yourself, because showing your work inevitably invites criticism. Some of it will be helpful, sharpening your vision and helping you grow. But some of it will be cruel, careless, or simply irrelevant. Kleon reminds us not to internalize every voice. Take the feedback that feels constructive and let the rest drift away like smoke. Protect your energy, because not every comment deserves your attention. Remember the mantra: you don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start to become great. Let that anchor you when noise threatens to drown out your signal. He also teaches the art of subtraction, of knowing what to leave out. Not every detail of your process, not every thought in your mind, needs to be shared. Curation is part of the gift. Think of a museum. The curator doesn't put every artifact on display, but chooses what will tell the most resonant story. In the same way, you can choose what pieces of your work, your process, your inspiration are most likely to connect with others. The restraint itself is part of the art. It builds trust. It creates intrigue. And it ensures that what you do share has weight. And in the long journey of showing your work, there will be seasons. Seasons of creation, seasons of sharing, seasons of rest. You are not a machine meant to churn endlessly. Kleon reminds us that rest, reflection, and even retreat are vital. Sometimes the most important part of showing your work is stepping back, letting silence do its work, and returning when you are renewed. Like fields left fallow to restore their strength, your creativity needs rhythms of pause. Respecting those rhythms keeps you from burning out and allows your work to carry freshness and authenticity. What's beautiful is how these principles echo in the lives of people we admire. Consider Maya Angelou, who spoke openly about the messy, non-linear process of writing, admitting that much of her work came from persistence, not inspiration. Or consider creators like Jack White, who intentionally imposed limits on his music making using faulty guitars, or restricting his options to force creativity to emerge. They were not afraid to share not only the shine of their work, but the scaffolding behind it. Their willingness to be open, imperfect, and persistent gave us art that endures. As you let these ideas sink in, notice the way your shoulders might unclench a little. Notice the sense of relief that you don't have to wait until everything is perfect, that you don't need to pretend to be flawless, that you can start from exactly where you are. This is the midpoint of hope, the moment when you realize that the very things you thought disqualified you are the things that make you relatable, human, worth listening to. Your unfinished work, your rough drafts, your unpolished notes. They are not embarrassments. They are invitations. invitations for others to join you in the beautiful, ongoing experiment of becoming. And so, the journey bends towards something more enduring. The idea that showing your work is less about proving yourself and more about leaving traces. Each trace, no matter how small, becomes part of a larger mosaic that tells the story of a life fully lived. Kleon speaks of this like planting seeds. Some seeds sprout quickly, some lie dormant for years, and some are carried far away by winds you'll never feel. But the act of planting is what matters. Every blog post, every sketch, every idea shared is a seed. You cannot control what grows, but you can keep planting. And over time, your small, humble acts of sharing accumulate into a garden, one that not only feeds others, but also nourishes you. Part of tending this garden is learning to be discoverable. Kleon talks about the importance of being findable, of leaving breadcrumbs in the digital landscape that allow others to stumble across your work. This doesn't mean manipulating algorithms or chasing trends. It means showing up consistently, attaching your name to what you create, and making it easy for others to connect the dots. The internet is a vast ocean, but even a single buoy, brightly marked, can guide someone to you. Think of how many times you found a blog post from 10 years ago that spoke directly to what you needed in that moment. The writer had no idea you would be reading it today, but because they showed their work, their voice reached you across time. Your work can do the same for someone else. Kleon also insists that your work doesn't need to be grand or monumental to matter. In fact, the small things often carry the most weight. A single photograph can shift a mood. A short paragraph can change a perspective. A simple tutorial can unlock someone's creativity. There is a quiet dignity in the small, and when you string enough small things together, they become something big. Too often, we get stuck waiting to make something massive, when the truth is that greatness is built from the accumulation of smallness. Step by step, post by post, sketch by sketch. The mantra circles back. You don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start to become great. But here lies another gentle warning. The work you share should not consume you. You are not defined solely by your output. You are a person first, an artist second. If showing your work begins to erode your joy, it's time to pause. Kleon emphasizes the importance of balance, or protecting your private life, setting boundaries, holding some pieces of your story close. Your worth is not measured by how much you share. Sharing should be an extension of your creativity, not a cage around it. The goal is not to be endlessly transparent, but to be authentically generous. And that means knowing when to step back. The beauty of this balance can be seen in creators like Banksy. Here is someone whose art is wildly public, but whose identity remains private. The separation between self and work allows the art to shine while preserving the person behind it. You don't have to go to Banksy's extreme, but the principle stands. You get to choose how much of yourself you reveal. Sharing is a tool, not a mandate. You are always in control of your own story. And while you may not see it immediately, each act of sharing is a form of legacy. Kleon reminds us that showing your work is how you leave something behind. Not a grand monument, but a trail of words, images, and ideas that others can follow. Long after you're gone, the traces you left can continue to inspire, guide, and comfort those who find them. Think of Marcus Aurelius, whose private journal of reflections, meditations, was never meant to be published. Yet centuries later, those notes continue to guide readers through their own struggles. He showed his work without intending to, and that work became immortal. You too can leave behind echoes that last beyond your lifetime. And so, what does all this mean for you right now? Listening with that quiet hunger inside, it means you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait until you're certain, or ready, or perfect. You can begin with what you have, where you are today. You can start by sharing something small, a thought, a lesson, a question. And tomorrow, you can share another. Over time, you will find your voice not by waiting for it to arrive fully formed, but by using it. You will discover yourself in the act of revealing yourself. Let this be a gentle pause, a breath in the middle of this river of ideas. You might be feeling the weight of possibility, the mix of fear and hope that comes with imagining yourself truly seen. That's natural. That's human. But remember, every person you admire once stood in that same trembling place, wondering if they dared to let their work leave their hands. They chose to share, and because they did, you were touched. Now it is your turn. Someone out there is waiting for you, not for your perfection, but for your presence. And now the path bends toward renewal, toward the realization that showing your work is not a burden but a rhythm, a way of moving through the world with openness instead of fear. When you release the need to appear flawless, you step into a gentler, truer way of living. Kleon encourages us to think of creativity as a daily practice, like tending a fire. Some days the flames roar high, other days it's only embers, but the key is to keep tending, keep feeding, keep showing. That simple practice over time becomes its own kind of faith. You learn to trust that even on the days when your spark feels small, it still matters. You still matter. He also invites us to reframe failure, not as an enemy, but as evidence of courage. Every time you show something that doesn't land, every time you risk and stumble, you are proving that you are in motion, that you are alive in your work. Failure is not a verdict. It is a signpost. It points the way to what comes next. When you allow others to see your missteps, you offer them a gift far greater than perfection. You offer them permission. Permission to try, to fall, to rise again. Think of Thomas Edison, who openly spoke of the thousands of failed experiments that led to the invention of the light bulb. He didn't hide the mess. He revealed it. And in doing so, he reminded us that innovation is built not on a single leap, but on countless falls. There's a tenderness here, a recognition of how exhausting it can be to always give. Kleon balances this by reminding us to stay curious, to keep filling our own well. Showing your work doesn't mean running yourself dry. It means continually seeking, learning, gathering so that you have something to share. Follow your fascinations, he says. Read widely, explore boldly, collect what stirs you. These inputs will feed your outputs. And by sharing not just what you make, but what inspires you, you become a guidepost for others. You help them discover books, songs, ideas they may never have found on their own. In this way, you become not just a maker, but a connector, weaving together strands of curiosity into a larger web. There is also the gentle reminder to stay grounded. Success, if it comes, can be a dangerous high. The temptation is to chase more attention, more applause, more validation. But Kleon calls us back to humility. Remember why you started. Remember that your work is not about feeding an audience, but about feeding your soul. Fame fades, trends shift, platforms rise and fall. What remains is the steady practice of making and sharing. If you stay rooted in that, you cannot be shaken by the winds of change. Consider how this played out for someone like J.K. Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter in obscurity, scribbling in cafes, rejected by publishers. She didn't begin with fame. She began with persistence and love for her story. Even after the global phenomenon that followed, she returned to writing again and again, not because she needed more applause, but because that was her rhythm. Her story shows us that even when recognition arrives, the work itself is the true prize. So here you are, standing at the threshold. You've listened to these ideas, felt their pull, perhaps even imagined yourself stepping out with more openness. But the question remains, what will you do with this? Kleon's challenge is simple yet profound. Start small. Share one thing tomorrow. A quote that moved you. A behind-the-scenes photo of your process. A question you're wrestling with. Don't wait for the masterpiece. Offer the fragments. Over time, those fragments weave into a whole. The world doesn't need your perfection, it needs your participation. And in that invitation is a quiet challenge. To trust yourself enough to be seen, even in your becoming. To let your lantern join the trail of others, lighting the path for those who come after. Imagine it now a dark shoreline, each person holding a small flame. One by one, the lights spread, until what was once shadow is alive with fire. That is the vision Kleon offers us. A world not of isolated geniuses, but of connected creators, each showing their work, each helping to brighten the night. And so we close, not with an ending, but with a beginning. Let this be your first step. Share something, anything, and let it ripple outward. Someone is waiting for your light. Someone is waiting for your trace. And as you step forward, remember the mantra that has whispered through these pages. You don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start to become great. If this message has touched you, if it has stirred something inside, I want to gently invite you to stay connected. Like, share, comment, subscribe, not for me, but for the community we are building together. Your voice matters here. Your reflections, your insights, your feelings sparked by this conversation could be the very thing another listener needs. So take a moment to engage, to leave your mark, to show your own work in this shared space. Because when you do, the circle widens, the light grows, and together we become part of something larger than ourselves. And as you close your eyes tonight, may you see yourself not as someone waiting for permission, but as someone already holding the seed, already carrying the flame. All that's left is to plant it, to light it, to show it. The dawn is coming, your work is waiting, and the world is ready.